Okay, yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you can all understand my thick, overly exaggerated Scottish accent. Today, I'm going to cover quite a bit of a broad range of topics. Actually, I've kind of put a bit of a got you because I've changed the theme last minute. We're talking with James. What we've decided to do is I kind of thought we will cover AI and machine learning, but I kind of thought with this being the first session, rather than me give you something such as what are the latest frameworks, what may be the next best libraries in machine learning, or what are the best DevOps tools to use, I'm actually going to take a bit of a risk. Hopefully this will have a bit of a payoff, but my plan is to give you a bit of a personal journey that I've had in open source, and the aim is not for me to kind of come across as showboating, but my aim is to try and have something that everybody here can relate to, or at least have some forms of synergies that you can all sort of feel like, basically, yeah, I could do that. And I think that's what I'm going to try and get across today. So a little bit about me and a bit of a background about me. So I'm the head of DevOps in Barclays in the Chief Security Office. I also manage and head up the environments team as well as the run the bank. So quite a heavy repertoire there. I also have a background in physics, and here's the first bombshell, which I want to try and drop, which is literally 4 years ago, maybe. As a physics grad, I knew nothing about coding. So 4 years ago, I thought I knew something about coding. I had no idea. Before then, I worked in a chicken factory. And then before then, I was a bricklayer. I'm now the head of DevOps, the head of infrastructure, and the head of environments, and I code hands-on, so I'm not just a talker. And the point is, I kind of want to get across that we live in a different world and that you can get there too. So that's the first theme that I want to kind of open up on. So I was very fortunate in my very first role in tech that I actually worked with mainframe developers, DB2, COBOL. So the average age of the developers I worked with was about 55. And so it's really important that we appreciate the sort of world that we live in. So we don't code, we don't develop, and we don't test in isolation. What I mean by that is those developers that I worked with 20, 25 years ago, when they were developing code, if their code failed to compile 3 times, they'd be called in the back office. If it failed to compile on the 4th time, you'd be fired. And so, we live in this world where we say, well, I'm a millennial, or I don't have those problems, but why aren't things moving fast? Why do people hoard code? Why do we live in a world where we still have elitism in software development, which is now becoming fast the main source of employment? So the point I just want to drive there is there's a reason for that, which is many of those people that are now in leadership come from a time which was much, much harder. They come from a time where it was more merciless in terms of your development, your career progression, and essentially your contribution to the company. So what does that actually mean then? Thanks, James. Does that? Yeah, that sounds better. So essentially, when I first started coding about 5 years ago, the story was, fintech companies, no, they're not going to compete with us. How can they compete with us? They don't have the data. Then about two years afterwards, the attitudes changed to, fintech companies, they can eat on the outside of the cake, so they can do things like aggregated banking. They can do all these sort of softer services, but they don't have a banking license, and they don't have the data, and they don't have the infrastructure, so they can never compete with us. And now what the leaders are saying in finance are, how can we cooperate more with fintech? How can we learn from fintech? Fintech are moving fast. How can we move fast like them? And so it's not a coincidence that the emergence of fintech, the progression of fintech, the progression of AI, and the progression of open source all happened about the same time. It's not a coincidence, and they are related. And the point I kind of want to drive across there is it's clearly a culture thing more than it is a technical foundation. So let's kind of talk about GitHub. So for those Again, my pitch here is to be more broad rather than sort of low level, but we will touch on some. So there's 40 million users in GitHub right now. The majority of those users are in Africa. So, the majority of the growth is in Africa, particularly Kenya and Ghana, where they are focusing on areas where they never had the capability before, right? So such as renting infrastructure and working on AI services. By far, the biggest chunk of all activity on open source is in Asia, and that's split between Korea, Japan, and China. And then Europe and America seems to be the most referenced. So we're about in the middle, but the work that we produce is still the most liked, the most retweeted, the most shared, and the most forked. And that is because of this legacy standing on the shoulders of giants. So, okay, many of you might be sitting here saying like, okay, I don't care, I'm a project manager, I'm a BA, so what does that have to do with me? And I think James hit the point perfectly earlier. You don't really need to code to be on GitHub. You put up a few README pages, some ideas, get there to join into the community because it is growing rapidly. My most recent job that I got, part of my interview was a review of my GitHub profile, what I do in my free time. It was the job that I got before was the same, and the job that I got even when I was working in China was the same, was essentially a line-by-line review of my GitHub and what did you do here? Why did you do that? And so GitHub really is the CV of today and of tomorrow. There's a bit of showboating here, but it's just to show that what I'm saying has gravitas. So in terms of GitHub, I'm in the top 100 contributors in the world. So I had 3,000 contributions this year alone, 165 repos. So you can think of that as projects. And on average, I commit about 5 times a day. These are the projects that I've worked on. I'll share the slides after, so there's all the information there that you can look at. I'm not going to go into them all, but some of them have helped me personally. Some of them have helped me professionally. The point I want to get across here is this has actually become my life. I've met many of my friends. My career progression has happened through my activity on GitHub. And so, okay, how did I get from being a bricklayer to working in tech? A few steps. I'm going to try and be as simple as I can. What I would do is I'd try to learn something. I'd be like, oh, well, how do I build a website? So I'd go on YouTube or look at a blog, and I'd learn it, and I'd try it. And then what I'd do is I'd change something, right? So I'd look at something maybe in the beginning I wouldn't understand what a variable was, or an array, or a data type. So I'd play about with it. And then once I kind of got an idea from changing things, I just put it on GitHub. And the minute I put it on GitHub, it kind of gave me like a sense of achievement, because it's like, yeah, that's my work there, and that's online, and everybody can see that and watch it build up over time. And then obviously the next thing you do is you go on LinkedIn and you share it, and you pretend that you're an expert. And then you go on Twitter and you also share it and you retweet it and you say, look what I've done. I've built a brain mass classifier, which might be like 3 lines of code. But then the great thing about that is people are extremely generous, in my opinion. On social media, people are quite vitriol. But when it comes to the work that you've shared, they're generally quite generous, as long as you don't position it in a sort of divisive way. So if you go online and you say, oh, I've been working on this thing and I've finally figured out how to build a Hello World application or to do a simple web app, you'll find that people will often share that a lot. They'll give you likes. Your family and friends will share that, and then very quickly that will disseminate into the professional sphere. And there's so many times that I go to events where people are like, oh, you're Adam, you've built this. And so it has become a big part of my life, and it is a very simple process that you can follow. And then obviously once you've kind of done that, what I find doing is call up some friends who are kind of wanting to get into coding or whatever and say, let's meet up at Starbucks. Bring your laptop and, okay, this is how you do a git commit. Or here's how you create a HTML file. And then obviously you get progressively more complex. But that's essentially what worked for me, and I think that might work for most people. I'm heavily against elitism, obviously. And so, again, working with people who, in my opinion, are the people I respect the most, mainframe developers. Again, they're now close to retirement, but they set the foundation, right? Mainframe put the man on the moon. Mainframe has produced the most successful economies and nation states in the world. So sure, we're developing in Java, PySpark, Python, and the latest languages today, but we are still underpinned by the shoulders of the giants. And I think that culture still persists heavily even today. I just think it's much more beneficial. I mean, if we want our companies to succeed, we kind of have to be more open about like our own abilities. And so for me personally, one of the things I did in DevOps is I took a year out to train up 11 women in DevOps because it's the most underrepresented area in tech that I could find. It's no reflection on my personality. Again, it's just good if you just share stuff with people. Pen in a Starbucks meeting. And just to prove it, there's my first Hello World commit to GitHub, and it's only 3 years ago. And I'm now in the top 100 contributors. But obviously it doesn't stop there. Like, you can get yourself out there. So I do videos in Chinese and Polish and English and everything from AI to assembler. But ultimately, everybody, I think the truth of the matter is we're all human, right? So most people only have about 1 or 2 good projects in them, right? So there are a few people that can punt out projects every week or two, but in reality, that's not the truth. Most people, so for example, if I was to unfortunately die tomorrow, if people looked at my GitHub, they'd remember me for 1 or 2 things, not for 10 or 20 things. It is slightly different for organizations like Facebook, because they'll have famous repositories such as for frameworks, libraries, and things like that. But for individuals such as yourself, you'll be known by 1 or 2 things. So I'll talk a little bit about my 2 flagship projects, 2 or 3. So this is one thing that I worked on. Essentially, I built a bunch of bots on Twitter. I use a lot of sentiment analysis, AI to try and produce metrics to understand what people are actually thinking. I learned a lot. One thing I learned was social media is not a good barometer for public opinion. I can at least prove that statistically now, although it's not much of a shock horror, is it? But that was a really big part of my life. Also, more collaboratively, so a close group of friends, and we're working on technologies to help people in the deafblind community who are the most kind of, I would say, underserved community out there. And the future one, which I'll try to plug to you guys later on after this, is Team Hunt. So I'm picking up on building on NASA's Insight project to basically, rather than everybody share their CPU, we all share our skills and expertise to try and see if we can answer some of the biggest questions. Okay, so that's all good and sounds awesome, but there's a downside to it. SonarQube have a lot of stats. One of the ones I haven't put here, which is a big one, 40% of all open source code is bad code. Has malicious, either has viruses or malicious code or some form of sloppy code which is full of vulnerabilities. So you kind of have to have your, sure, when you're working on your own, you don't need to worry about that. But the minute you want to put it out into the public, you need to get your security hat on. And also open source, and this is no disrespect to Siraj, I forgive him. Does anybody know who this guy is? Any hands up? So.
We work.
Sorry?
We work.
No, so Siraj is actually, if you're good in the AI space, you'll know him. Anybody that is decent in AI knows this guy. He was my hero. About 5 years ago, he kind of showed people that you don't need a degree in computer sciences, or you don't need a background to get into coding. He produced some of the most amazing work. He's super famous, but we started to wonder, why is he producing things on GitHub so quickly and so fast and at high quality? He has his own YouTube videos. He was recently found out that all of his work was plagiarized, everything on GitHub. It didn't even stop there. He actually published papers which were plagiarized from Google, Nature articles, and other big companies such as DeepMind, and were peer-reviewed. He made it into the scientific community, which shows you how shit they are. So he essentially passed all barriers, changed a few words, and then same on GitHub. He was coming out and saying, oh, here's my classifier, and then, oh, here's my Bitcoin stock prediction algorithm. And what he was doing is he was taking people's hard work and just changing the name. And he got away with it for 5 years. He's recently confessed, and I personally forgive him. I believe he has turned a leaf. But the point I want to get across at is there are bad actors out there, and they will capitalize on the work that you've done. And there's no complaints process in open source. The only way you can manage it is by the community. The way that Siraj got managed was people like us were like, this guy's a cheat. And eventually there was enough pressure on him to force him to come out, to step back, to pay back money. And that only happened by crowd, by this, I guess the open source community itself. Okay, so I'm a DevOps guy, what do I care about that? So if you're in DevOps or if you're in infrastructure or in environments, you'll know how hard it is picking the right tool sets. You know, do you go for enterprise, do you go for open source? It's really, really hard. And the way that used to be done about 5 years ago was most companies would rely on a rock star. A rock star would come in and they would say, you know, this is the tool that you pick. But they will take you on the direction that they want to take you. That's the things that they know. There is nobody in this room that can claim that they know everything here as an expert. I'm the head of DevOps. I'm meant to know this stuff as an expert. I expect my guys to know this, but I can't master everything here. And this is just a small sliver of what's actually out there. So the need to be honest and open is huge, right? So just admit, like, okay, I'm good at this, but I'm not really good at that. And that way we kind of move forward. In the AI space, I think the gentleman asked the question earlier, like, what do you do if, you know, massive data sets, you can't put them on GitHub? You put them on Kaggle, and the reason why you put them on Kaggle is because Kaggle's awesome, right? So hopefully this will work. In Kaggle, you'll get, this is the open source for AI developers and ML engineers. You get awesome competitions where you can win a lot of money. You build your AI algorithms, you generate your own data, and you put it there, and for people to share. Also, I guess the training. Just one thing I'll quickly show you is the training here is really awesome. So you could know nothing about coding at all, and you can see I'm halfway through, and start here, and this will get you well into, like by the time you finish these courses, you'll be submitting your own competitions and your own data sets. So it's when you. Okay, and then Katacoda, so people like, okay, I'm not into AI, but I want to learn how to use Docker, I want to learn how to use GitHub. Cannot recommend this enough. It is absolutely amazing. I'll not go into it, but I'll just tell you what it does. It's actually, they have so much compute that you can just go straight into a Docker shell or into a Kubernetes shell, OpenShift. It's got stuff like learning TensorFlow from scratch, learning Jenkins from scratch. I strongly recommend this. It's what got me to where I am. And I'm going to touch a little bit on James's point. So, okay, so I talked a lot about how I got to where I am, but I also want to talk about what the future is. The future is, like, we're all from different backgrounds here, right? When somebody talks about AI, some of us will go to sleep. When somebody talks about project management or testing, somebody goes to sleep. The trick is you have to merge everything, and so literate programming is the way forward, right? This one looks a bit boring, but I'll explain it. So imagine you're like, you're a physics worker in a small industry, and you're presenting your new algorithm to the business, right? So maybe a professor, he might be interested in the formula there. The engineers will be interested in the coding that you've written, and then maybe the business managers, they actually just want to see the waveform. So it's a way that you mix images, code, and formulas in one page so that you can present to everyone. This is Jupyter Notebooks. I mean, to some people, this will be pretty obvious stuff. But the point is literate programming is clearly the way forward as tech takes up more and more of the job roles, because you need to kind of communicate to everyone. I think I've got time. 10 minutes?
About 5 minutes.
Okay, right. Okay, so
You can do AI in 5 minutes, can't you?
yeah, sure, why not? I'll hedge and do 7 minutes and hope for a few questions, right? Okay, so yeah, this is a bombshell, right? So AI is a buzzword, obviously. It's a big one. When I started in my previous company, when I was in China, I remember talking to the CEO, and he was like, oh, get me some of that AI. That AI is great. Get me 20 kilos, 50 kilos of AI, treating it like it's some sort of product, when in fact AI may not be the optimal solution. So ML and neural networks may not be the optimal solution depending on your business, but let's just talk about some stuff and try and wow you before I go. So these people don't exist. These were generated by general adversarial neural networks. That's what you're dealing with now. So imagine what you're dealing with tomorrow. That kind of blows my mind, right? Like the girl on the top left, she looks a bit like Tulsi Gabbard, maybe, but I mean, these people all don't exist. And that was like, I think that was like 3 days of training. So somebody left their computer training for 3 days to generate that. So where I see the future of AI is definitely in China. Smile to Pay is a service. I'll just give you a quick example of two. When I go to China, I smile to pay. Does anybody know why you might smile to pay? Any ideas? You should be able to get it, maybe anyone? Any ideas? The reason why I smile to pay is smiling is not the thing that you normally do. So when you walk into the airport, you especially don't do it in Scotland, but generally a smile is new data, right? So when they capture you smiling to pay, that's new data that they can slice, dice, and remarket. And so China lead the way, obviously, because they have more people than us, so they have more data. But they're also just more ahead and forward thinking. Here's another cool product. So think about you crash a car on the motorway, and you don't know anything about cars, so you don't know if you're going to get ripped off by the mechanic. So you get out your phone, and the phone will say, come closer, go into the wheel trim, stand back, and then what the phone does is it generates a list of damages using an AI engine that's running on the cloud. And then it will say to you, right, your bill should be £800. And you can go to the mechanic, and the mechanic might say, oh, it's £2,000. And you say, well, it only says 800 here. It also is the Uber of mechanics, because once you scan it, a bunch of mechanics will come up and say, I'll take that for you. So you can just click and pick a mechanic, and they'll take the trade for you. So that's another example of what AI is in China. Some other ones are things like rent contract generators. So you talk to your landlord with your phone, and it records and dictates what you're saying and generates a contract on the fly. It measures the honesty in your voice and facial recognition. So if you say, oh, will you give me back the deposit? And the landlord goes, yeah. And they say, okay, that's a lie. And so you can then underwrite that in the insurance, which is also part of the product. I'll wrap up quite quickly, but for me, we're all, like, regardless of your position, right, most companies in London will be considering ML of some sort, and there's too much that I can say in like 5 minutes or 4 minutes. Please read the slides afterwards. I'll share them, look at them, just get the basic idea of the sort of pitfalls that are out there, because there's a lot. There's far more pitfalls than there are advantages. I guess one of the easiest ways to say, if you do AI the wrong way, you can make your company go bust intelligently. Read those. Unfortunately, I don't have that much time to share. I'm going to kind of finish off on, well, I'll mention this, that even smart systems are easy to fool, right? So like, my favorite one is, human systems are exploitable, but intelligent ones are even more exploitable, right? So like, is it a muffin or is it a dog? And then, like, obviously the Terminator wouldn't have caught Sarah Connor if we just blurred the words, right? So it is kind of, there's truth in that. This is the final one. I just want to quickly talk about what I think. So if you don't listen to anything that I've said, hopefully there'll be 6 wins that you can, maybe one of them might be useful to you. So who actually does Agile or Scrum? Hands up, be honest. Be honest, like, do you actually, oh, okay, that's impressive. Does anybody do evil user stories? Does anyone do evil user stories? Oh, one person. So evil user stories is a great thing to do. You create a story and you say, how can I sabotage this project? Like, how could I break it? Or like, what? Be honest with yourselves. Create a story, put it in the backlog. Only takes 5 minutes. Do it on a Friday for fun. Evil user story generates far more benefit than you might actually think. Chat automation, so if you've got a support team and you're good in developers, just put some buttons in there so that rather than them get an alert and say the server's down, give them the button to restart the server and shorten that human feedback cycle. Governance as code, I'm massive on this, but I think the way forward is trying to find a system that combines both humans and automated processes, not Jenkins. There are tools out there, Excel Release, Urban Code Deploy, look into them. Code amnesty, okay, this is a big one. So code amnesty. A code amnesty, imagine one day every month where you can just be honest and just say, that code's got a bug in it, or I kind of fucked it up and forgot to put it in production. And just have a day where people can just flag stuff anonymously and just say, that needs fixed, that's broken, that's gonna fail, and then allow us to generate the remediation. And we don't want to, it's not a blame culture, but the best way to do that is to work through code amnesty. I'll not talk about the cool tools for school. I'll finish off on the one last point, which is really close to my heart. Has anybody read the Phoenix Project? Good. Does anybody remember Brent? Who remembers Brent? Right. Brent was the guy that was super intelligent. Brent was the guy that on a Friday, if you needed to deploy to production, Brent's got it. You need to remediate your Brents. Brents are where the biggest technical debt and the biggest risk to your organization, especially moving in an open source world. If you haven't read the Phoenix Project, I strongly recommend it. And I'll finish up on this note. So software only generates value if it's running or if you sell it. So I appreciate this was really scattershot. I hope there was a little bit of something for everyone in the audience today, and thank you for your time.